Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Franchise Show. This is the show, and I'm going to do it where we get under the hat of all things franchising. And it's a live show. Well, it's live if it's the 21st of July at 5:15 in the UK and 12:15 in bits of America. And because it's live, we love you to get involved. So please pop in a comment, say hello, and get involved in our conversations. Because I say each week, you are the producers and the directors of this show. This is what I write down beforehand. That's my prep. It's impressive, isn't it? Nothing there at all. And that's because this is a conversation not between the three lovely people you see on the screen, but it's a conversation between our entire community. So please get involved. Before I introduce you to our lovely guests, let me let you know what our topic it is today. Today, we are going to be talking about understanding your franchise people. And it's going to be a fantastic conversation. We've got two legends to talk about this. Firstly, let me introduce, and you all know Neil Newman from Gather. Neil, welcome back to the Franchise Show.
Thanks, Harvey. Good to be here.
And we have Dan Archer from Visiting Angels. Dan, absolute pleasure to have you on the show. We've spoken a few times, and it's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me on, Harvey.
My pleasure. So before we get into the topic today, let's do some little introductions just so that we can set the scene and we know where we're at. We're going to start off with Neil. Do a little introduction to yourself, Neil, and also why people are an important part of your world and your business.
Yeah, thanks, Harvey. I'm Neil Newman. I'm the founder of Gather. Our platform enables people of all walks of life, whether it's customers, staff, or franchisees, to speak up and have a voice. And it's important to point out that, and it'll probably come up in this conversation, that we're not saying people shouldn't talk to other people. They absolutely should. But it's very important to actually catch that evidential information, because if it's not written down, it didn't happen. So that's what we help businesses do, understand that in a quantitative, easy way, but also give the voice to whomever easily. So that's what we do, help both franchisees, their customers, and franchisors.
Lovely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really important for people to have a voice, and this is part of what this is about. So yeah, love that. And the same for you, Dan. A lot of people are going to know you. I've certainly known you for someone who speaks out for people, speaks out for your entire team, your colleagues around you, your peers, and always puts those people first. So it's great to have you on. Let us know kind of how that passion has come about.
Well, I guess, Harvey, thank you for having me on again. I'm founder and UK chief executive of a business called Visiting Angels. We're a domiciliary care provider, a home care provider. So the nature of our business is that we work with individuals who provide care to those who need it. Our caregivers, the teams of people who are helping vulnerably placed adults in the community to receive the care that they need. And obviously our clients are people, and their families are people. And there are people in the community who are surrounding the work that we do. So it's a very people-y business. I have the distinct pleasure of saying that in summer 2017, when I was putting together the business plan for the launch of Visiting Angels in the UK, I think I became the first person on the planet to use the words carer-centric. So our approach as a home care provider is a caregiver-centric business, a carer-centric business. We've made our care teams the most important people in our organization. And so I guess that's probably one of the reasons that you've asked me to come on and talk about people-y stuff.
People-y stuff. I quite like it. I mean, care-centric's good, but I like people-y business. But they're both good.
I did a TED talk in Arizona about a month and a half ago, longer than that, April it was, a couple of months ago now. And it was the end of Arizona Tech Week. And I gave an anti-AI TED talk where I was basically talking about AI being problematic, because what we need as a society is people to be more people-y and technology to help people to be more people-y. So I like the people-y bit.
I do as well. Absolutely, absolutely. Right, before we get into things today, let's welcome a few people who've joined us live already. We have Omar coming live from Arizona. Always good to have you with us, Omar. He's got his own fantastic live show called Zoom Party, and it's a quiz, and I've been on it, and it's absolutely mental, but good fun. But great to have you here, Omar. We've got the lovely David Moffat with us. He's put good afternoon, gents. Always good to have David with us. He is a seasoned QSR and hospitality expert and certainly knows his peoply business. So good to have you with us, David. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts on people and your experiences over the years. We've got the lovely Danny Wareham with us. I've got his book somewhere. He's got a lovely book called Constellation, and he's certainly an expert on people and culture. He's often been a guest on the show. Quite often it's at Christmas time. He has a lovely Christmas jumper. But he's put here, someone said, understanding people, and it was like a bat signal for me to listen in. Well, you're certainly somebody who does understand people and culture. So looking forward to hearing your thoughts, Danny, as we go through the conversation today. We've got a couple more people to welcome. Now, these are people now that are traditionally getting me to pronounce things that I find difficult. So this is all good fun. We've got Johnny Joseph. He's put hola. Is that good? Pronounce that, Harvey, from Los Angeles, where I've returned from our worldwide headquarters for franchisee royalty audits from a week in Los Cabos. Looking forward to another fabulous discussion. It's great to have you with us, Johnny, as always, and looking forward to hearing your thoughts on peoply business. As I say, that's now one of my new favorite expressions. Here we go. We've got Joe Caruso with us now. Joe definitely wants me to try and pronounce where he lives, and he's going to give me a score for this. This has now become a weekly thing, and I refuse to Google it. I am just going to keep pronouncing it until the score gets better. He's put good day all from high above the smoke-filled plumes from massive wildfires. Oh gosh, hopefully everything's okay there. In Ontario, California, CA, there you go. Plaguing the shores of Havre de Grace, Maryland, at the Susquehanna River and the Chesapeake Bay at Franchise Info LLC HQ, the gateway for brands to come to America. Well, it's great to have you with us, Joe. Joe is a real expert on all things franchising in America, and he certainly knows his people. So it'd be great to get your thoughts on how people have been involved in your businesses, whether that's franchisees, franchisors, and colleagues in the industry. Who else have we got? We have got the lovely Simon Wise with us. He's put, hello, franchise friends, franchise people are my business. Absolutely. Simon is, of course, a recruiter here in the UK. So absolutely, people are very much his business. Let's have a look. Johnny's come back with, to clarify, Joe is suffering from fires in Ontario, Canada. Oh, okay. He's not normally in Canada. It threw me. He threw me there. Danny's put the soft, squishy bits in business. Oh, interesting. Maybe we'll come back to that one, actually. In fact, I think we will. David's come back with, sorry, been busy working in London with lots of people. Well, it's good that you've been with the people. Finally, let's say hello to the lovely Charles Caldwell from Hong Kong. Always grateful for Charles being part of the show. It is around 1 a.m, I believe, for Charles. So thanks so much for being here. Joe's come back with Canada 8.5. 8.5 though. I think that is my best score to date. Even though rookie error on the country. Can't have everything. We're human after all. We're only people, aren't we? Right, let's get into this. Dan, let us know a little bit more about your business. You said something to me, right, that really interests me before we went on air today, which is to become the least important person in your business. And I really like that, because that's very different to what people normally say when they talk about being your own boss, isn't it? What do you mean by that? And how has that sort of culture come about in your organization?
Well, I guess when we started the research on bringing visiting angels to the UK, I identified a bit of a problem in the care space. You know, lots of care providers. I looked at lots of different businesses as part of the sort of sweep of market, the due diligence that I did, and lots of care businesses were focusing on their clients and on care delivery. They wanted to be outstanding care providers. They wanted to be the care provider of choice, but nobody was really focusing on their people. And the reality in the home care space is that if you can't solve the conundrum of where you find good quality caregivers from, you cannot provide a service, right? We've got a shortage of workers within the home care space, within the social care space, of 111,000 empty jobs. So the biggest challenge that every home care provider has got is how do you find the people that are going to provide that service? So when I put Visiting Angels together, the carer-centric thing was about saying, well, if we're going to fix this, we need to make it a core part of the business. You know, the vision for the business needs to be a people-first business, a caregiver-first business. We had a mission which was based around becoming an employer of choice and is currently based around becoming the biggest provider in the country by being an employer of choice. So we're all about the things that we do to build our workforce. But I had a problem quite early on with the piloting of the business, where I was sort of recruiting people that had experience in the social care sector, and they were sort of not necessarily treating the people that were providing care in the way that I wanted them to do. So they weren't being as carer-centric as I wanted them to be. And so we got the team together and we sat in the training room of the pilot location, and I had a registered manager, and I had a supervisor, and I had a care coordinator, and I had an admin. And I said to them all, okay, just do me a favor, draw me the organizational chart for this business, will you? And they all very dutifully drew an organizational chart with me at the top. And then they had themselves in the middle, varying degrees of kind of altitude within the middle order of the org chart, depending on how important they thought they were. And then they all had all of the care team at the very bottom. The carers were at the very bottom of the org chart. And I said to the team, look, you're all wrong. But the good news is you're wrong for exactly the same reason, because that's not an organizational chart for a carer-centric organization. A carer-centric organization needs to rotate that. So we have an upside-down organizational chart. And when you view the business in that way, I am at the bottom as the least important person in the organization. It started on my dining room table in summer 2017, but as the founder and UK chief exec, I am the least important person here. Our caregivers are at the very top of that org chart as the most important people in the organization. And I guess to your question, what that then leads to when it comes to recruiting franchisees is that we are looking for franchisees that want to place themselves at the bottom of their respective organizational chart, right? And that's relatively uncommon, because most of the narrative around encouraging people into self-employment through franchising is about be your own boss and lead your own organization. And those sentiments seem to be sentiments that build individuals up. And what I'm actually looking for is somebody that's prepared to lead with humility, somebody that's prepared to make themselves the least important person in our organization, because in essence, they are there to serve the people who are directly above them in that organizational chart. So yeah, it's tied up with servant leadership. It's tied up with, I call it leading with humility. It's absolutely about saying to a franchisee, if you're going to win in our business, you need a team of hundreds of caregivers going out into the community to support clients. And the only way you're going to win is by being there to serve them rather than to view yourself as above them, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you've made some fantastic points there, and I think it's really interesting to look at that. Everyone knows that traditional kind of triangle-shaped structure of a business, right? You spin that the other way up, and it's quite a good way of someone to picture how that might work in a business. And I love leading with humility. I think that's a really, really good thing for people to approach the business. When people say they care about their people, that needs to come across, and it clearly does with you by putting those people first. And that's a huge number, 111,000 jobs that are needed within the industry. So something's got to change, not just to encourage those people, but to understand what it is they need. What do they want? Why do they leave? Why isn't it right? And all of these questions to try and not just fill those vacancies, but create happy people in their jobs, make it rewarding, understand how they feel rewarded.
Yeah, I think, I think there's another thing in there as well, Harvey, because that figure. I mean, that figure, by the way, is 12 months out of date. The reality is that I'm sure there'll be a new set of numbers soon which show that unfortunately it's getting worse, not getting better. Because the reality is the demand for social care is increasing, and the issues that the workforce face haven't really been substantially addressed by government funders, local authorities commissioning care, and care providers who are employing these people. So I think there is every possibility that the number of vacancies in adult social care is going to be increasing, not decreasing. And I think without dropping too many stats on your audience, because your audience is a franchise audience, not a social care audience, right? But what I think is significant is in the last 4 years, according to the Home Care Association, 619,000 care workers have left the workforce. Now, they've not left the country, they've just left the job of being a carer. And at Visiting Angels, we take the view that we can probably get those people back, but we've got to be making the job more attractive in order to encourage them to return to that job. They're not going to run back to the job they chose to leave in the first place, right?
Absolutely. Neil, I'm going to push across to you now, because we've been talking here a lot about people either leaving a business, leaving a sector, not wanting to be employed by a sector. And that doesn't just go for care, it goes for hospitality, it goes for lots of other industries. In terms of understanding people, and I'm going to use the expression, you'll love this, but gathering that information, how do you think that helps? We're talking today about understanding our people. How have you found that getting that information helps businesses, understand their people and therefore make decisions that are better for their people?
From my own personal experience, I can't speak for every business that I speak to. It's more that the problems have happened where they see a diminish in their franchisees, and they're scratching their heads, understanding what happened there, and the horse has bolted, so to speak, and they've missed the opportunity. I mean, you've still got the opportunity to recover what the existing franchisees, but what mechanisms? And it's the same old story. They've got the same old mechanisms in place. Oh, we speak to them once a year or twice a year, and they say everything's great. It's just, again, going back to what I was saying, it's about giving them the opportunity and the freedom to express themselves, so that you're not getting skewed data or misinformed or no data at all, no information. So being forewarned with potential issues stops them becoming expensive problems, is what I'm saying. And again, I re-emphasize, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. So if you haven't got this in some sort of format digitally, and I'm not dismissing that you shouldn't have a personal relationship with your franchisees, you absolutely should, but some won't tell you the truth. They'll just tell you what you want to hear. And those are the sort of things some businesses, not saying all businesses, but some businesses need to understand and need to accept. So yeah, that's how we see sort of the landscape changing.
I think you're right, and I think it's really hard to. Sometimes it's easy to get a sense of things aren't right within a business with your people. Right? People are leaving. People are kind of saying things to each other. You're hearing certain things. Right, but you're not getting a true understanding of it. And I think even when companies give the opportunity, they put out a survey, like you say, maybe once a year, that they try and find out some information. Either someone's filling it in with a sense of fear and dread that they're going to be found out that they don't like things, or they're going to feel that they're going to be ignored. So I think it's also really important, and Dan clearly gets this, to create this culture of it's okay to come to us to say this bit's not right, or can we do it this way? Or what do you make of that, Dan? Is that the culture
I was going to say Dan's at the top of the tree of this culture. I mean,
it's interesting. When we spoke, we were talking about the dynamism that's important in that data, because the feedback that we get from the care teams is real-time data whilst they're delivering care. So if there's an instance of stress involved in the day that they're having, it might be to do with the day that they're having, and that could be to do with where they're having to travel to, or the client that they're spending time with, or the amount of time they've got in the visit. So it's really important in those situations that you're not, if you're surveying people once a year, you're missing out what's going on the day-to-day when you do that, right? But I think what's really interesting for me is that we measure peoply stuff. There's going to be a whole new lexicon of people-related words now. Right? So some of the key performance indicators which are really important in our organisation are ones which are based around people, right? So whether that is on the recruitment of people, cost of hire, time to hire, conversion rate from inquiry through to caregiver that starts with us, or whether it is the retention rate of those caregivers, because one of the biggest issue in the care space is high staff turnover. I know that's an issue as well within the hospitality sector, where lots of organisations have got very high levels of staff turnover. Now there's an inherent cost to that, right? It costs far more to onboard and train new people than it does to retain people in the first place. So I think it's really important that the culture is not just simplified as being about a few big commercial levers, Harvey. I think I talk a lot about what we do in the care space, and my conversations always start with pay and contract type, better pay, proper contracts. Those are important bits. You can't ignore those. They're almost the table stakes items in the game of poker that is trying to retain your staff. But actually, people don't stay because of pay. They stay because of how they're heard, how they're valued, how they're appreciated, how well you understand them. And there's an awful lot of work that has to then go into communication around that to make sure you are listening to that feedback when it comes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got it right there. There's some basics, isn't there, that you need to get right, paying contracts, particularly within your world, and particularly that last part of it, that contract part of it. I mean, my wife's worked in care for many years. It's a very tough job to do. And there are many tough jobs that perhaps aren't paid enough. But you're absolutely right. Get that part right. But then once you've got it right, it's then all of those other things that are really important. Simon was just about to ask a question that we've almost answered for you through the natural course of this conversation. But we will come back to that one. I just want to recognise a few more people. We've also got some good questions coming up from Simon, from Johnny, and from David Moffat, and we're going to get to those. Before we do that, let's welcome Kelly Steinecker to the show. She's put a little tardy to the franchise party. I've got that expression right. Good morning, y'all. I like doing my American accent there. It's lovely to see you, Kelly. I've done many a live show with Kelly, so great to have you here. Kelly is a CMO, so it'd be great to hear your thoughts on people. So let's go to another one from Simon here. We've talked a little bit about retention, and Simon's put, how do you know your franchise people are happy in their work? This is a really good question. I mean, Neil, we've started to talk about how you can help people find out that, but Dan, let's go to you first. Before you started looking at any kind of help or software or anything like that, what was your markers for trying to understand? Was it a gut feel? How was that culture or that feeling communicated, let's say, up that triangle?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think, I would say the same goes for recruitment and retention of caregivers as it does for recruitment and retention of franchisees in that respect. And I think, just to answer Simon's question in terms of retention stats for the caregivers, we're a 91% retention business against an industry average staff turnover of 60 to 70%, right? So we're 5 or 6 times better than market at keeping our people, right? But I think that's only possible because we have a network of franchisees who also recognize that that's an important problem that needs to be fixed. Right. So when we sit with I've done a franchise discovery call this morning with a new franchisee that's looking at joining Visiting Angels. And one of the first questions we're asking them is how they feel about the problems that exist within our sector. And do they understand the need for an organization to be valuing its people in the way that we do? Because if we don't find a franchisee that shares our vision for the way that a care business should be run, then it's unlikely that they're going to be successful within the Visiting Angels model. So we're looking for people that match that vision and who share the same values that we do. And I guess then what we're then into is the sort of communication that makes it possible to ensure that they are still saying all of those things and doing all those things as they grow their business. And that's absolutely, it's forums that we have for communication, it's feedback and surveys, it's physical events, whether they be regional meetings or an annual conference. It's a franchisee council, which enables franchisees to have an independent channel for mentioning something to a franchisor that they might otherwise struggle to do directly. And so lots of those mechanisms, I guess, that I would say that we use to ensure that we're able to listen to what a franchisee is thinking and saying.
Yeah, absolutely. A question I wondered, and I thought this might be a good thing to ask, just thought of this. When you see one of your caregivers, right, what's a question you ask them? What would you sort of say to a caregiver? Perhaps you haven't seen them for a while.
Yeah.
This is just you personally when you see one of your caregivers. I'm just interested because of your view on people.
Yeah, so what I start from a position of making sure I know a couple of key facts about every caregiver that works in our organisation. Right? And I'm talking about my pilot business as the first location, the Sheffield office for Visiting Angels. And this is exactly something we would expect our franchisees to be doing the same. So if I know a couple of bits of information about that caregiver, my question is probably going to be something about something that's important to them. So tell me, how are your kids? Yeah. Have you been to see your horse this week so far, right? So if you know that, you're able to meet somebody with a position of something that they're interested in, which makes it easier for them to have that conversation with you, right? Very difficult just to ask the question, how you doing? Because you probably get a platitude in that situation rather than a straight answer. But as Neil knows, what's interesting with data is if you ask the same question enough, you start to get a relative happiness score. So we have an app that we use within our network. Our caregivers use it. It's called the Angel Care app because our caregivers are the visiting angels, and the app is the app that's there to care for them. And within the Angel Care app, it's got a simple Likert scale where it asks caregivers how they're feeling. And it does that several times over the course of a day. And what we're then able to do is to look at how they respond to that "how are you feeling" question with relevance to the visits that they're going on, the time in the week, the amount of work they've done to that point in time. And so if they're consistently answering that they're happy, and then there are things which mean that during that week they're less happy, we're able to look at those trends and do something about understanding why that is, right? Yeah. But I think there's a pretty basic start point for the work that caregivers do, Harvey. And I'll share this with you. It's industry relevant, but I think it probably will translate into hospitality and other sectors. You mentioned contract type. There are 1.59 million workers in the adult social care workforce. 50% of those, 800,000 people, work in the home care space, domiciliary care. And 50% of those, that's 400,000 people, are on a 0-hour contract. And their employers complain about staff loyalty. And I would say, well, how can you possibly do that when you're not extending your staff any loyalty in the first place because you've got them on a 0-hour contract, right? So you've got to do the contract bit first. But if you look beyond that and say, what does the working week of a carer look like? Okay. If most carers, when they're working, will have instances during the week where their rota changes, normally at relatively late notice, and normally requiring them to go to maybe a visit they've not been to before. Now, if you do that on a regular basis, that gives you a build-up of first-day nerves stress, for want of a better phraseology. We work with a clinical psychologist out of Liverpool, John Moores University, to help us to understand some of these stress points. But if you're constantly asking someone to go and do a first visit, that's lots and lots of instances of first-day nerves. And for anyone that's ever had a first day in a job, those multiple instances of first day nerves are stressful for people, right? And another simple thing that happens in the care space is very often people delivering care don't have enough time to actually deliver the care they want to deliver. So they don't get closure on the task that they're completing. And I always say to the team, the guys that clean the windows at the office here get the job satisfaction of standing back from a clean window and going, I cleaned a window, right? You get closure on the thing that you're doing. If you're a carer and you don't get closure on the task of care you're delivering, again, over time, that creates PTSD-like symptoms in people. So you've got to not only look at pay, contracts, culture, you've also got to look at how someone's working and what you're asking them to do if you're going to really get into the weeds of sorting out the retention crisis in adult social care.
I think that's really interesting, looking at closure in a job, because that really does apply to lots of different industries. I'd never really thought about how closure applies to different industries, but it really does, completing that task. Whether that task, even if let's say you're working in a restaurant and you cook a meal, you finish cooking it, you look at the presented plate. If you are serving that meal, you put it down. Someone eats that meal, they smile at you when you collect it and take it away. You know that they've enjoyed their time. It's a really, really important thing, I think you said there.
I always go out of my way in a restaurant to ensure that the server gives feedback to the kitchen on my behalf.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you've got the front of house team get all the positivity. That was an amazing meal. It was fantastic. And you've got the guys in the background there who don't necessarily get that closure on how the meal was enjoyed.
I reinforce that because I actually go back to the kitchens and tell them.
Good man.
Yeah.
I just also wanted to say I'm missing on my version of this the emoticons, because I wanted to applaud that Dan on that excellent statistic on care retention, going back to Simon Wise's point. So I couldn't find the applaud thing, but I'm sure everybody else did.
Well, just do this.
When you set yourself a benchmark in the business, so we measure one of our key KPIs is caregiver retention, right? And we have this ridiculous position where we've got a really good retention stat that should be applauded, but actually we spend all of our time beating ourselves up because we want to make it a better number, right? And, you know, we have a location that's got 13% staff turnover. We're all banging our heads together thinking, what are they doing wrong? When actually lots of organizations will be really happy with that figure. So yeah, there's a bit of a relentless pursuit of the thing that's important in that situation.
I think that's true. I think that's a bit human nature, what you've said there. You know, even when someone said this to me about children, and I think this is really true, that, and it's a difficult thing to say, but I think you're only ever as happy as your unhappiest child. That's what someone said to me. And it made me think for a moment, but it's kind of true. You know, if there's something going on with one of your children, it takes up a lot of space up here. And you know, in business, therefore, if there's something going on with one of your sites, one of your people, then that takes up a lot of thought here. So it's a very interesting point. If you have just joined us today, this is the Franchise Show. Today we are talking people-y business and understanding your franchise people. It's been a fantastic conversation so far with Neil and Dan from Visiting Angels. And if you are here, please do get involved in our conversations. We've got some questions coming up from Simon, from David, and from Johnny. Let's have a look at this one from Johnny. Johnny has put, after 30 years of performing contract compliance services, which is inherently adversarial, it is scary how I'm able to size up the personality traits of those I deal with. Yeah, look, Johnny is an auditor. So he's coming into these businesses to try and audit them. And people are a bit kind of frightened of that. They're scared that they've done something wrong. And what else has he put here? Situation accurately predicting how the dynamic is going to go through the process. What do you guys think of first impressions? Yeah, this is a really good point, Johnny. You know, Johnny's come in there, and I know he's been a guest on this, and I know when he goes to a location, he immediately makes people feel at ease, that he's not there to try and catch them out. You know, he laughs and jokes with them and makes them feel comfortable. Let's take both your thoughts on first impressions, and Dan, perhaps you can go first on this. You know.
Yeah, massively important, I would say. So I think it's a great question, Johnny. Thank you for that. So there's a gentleman in the social care space called Neil Eastwood. Neil wrote a very good book called Saving Social Care. It's a good read if anybody fancies it. Actually, lots of the things that we do are within the book. By coincidence, by the way, I've not nicked his IP. I did ring Neil and say, look, I'm really sorry. It looks like we're copying you. We're not. You just did what you did at the same time as we did what we did. But Neil's got a very interesting statistic, which is that 16% of people quitting a care job on day one do so because they didn't feel welcome in the office. I'm like, that's a really easy fix. That's just as simple as smiling, saying hello, and saying, thank you for choosing to work with us. We know you had a choice on where you chose to go, right? And that's about first impressions, right? Yeah. I actually think those first impressions go back beyond day one, by the way, in that situation. I think you know, we look at the retention of a caregiver as something that starts when we're even arranging an interview with them. You know, we will send out an invitation to an interview saying, are you looking forward to being an angel? Thank you very much for choosing to interview with Visiting Angels, right? We're leaning into that idea of the fact that the workforce is a scarce thing. There's a shortage of people. So the sooner we can make people feel special, the better in that situation. But I think it's really, really important that people focus on that first impression, and that the reality is that if somebody reads you incorrectly or somebody dismisses you because they read that wrong first impression with you, it's really difficult to get someone back from that place, you know.
You don't get a second chance to make a first impression, do you?
That's the saying goes.
Absolutely. I mean, what's your take, Neil, on first impressions? I mean, I
I'm
think
going to be controversial. Only in so much as to say it really depends on what's going on, what the circumstances are. If you've got an auditor breathing down your neck and they're not as nice as one of your guests that we just mentioned, it can put you at ill ease, and your first impressions might not be the person you actually are. It's just that you're on tenterhooks in ensuring that. So sometimes you can be misjudged, is what I'm saying. I'm not saying that's all the time, and I'm loving again what Dan's doing in his job to make people feel welcome and everything. But yes, sometimes there are scenarios and situations where just judging people by first impressions, as much as I like to, isn't the right thing to do, especially when it's an impactful, pressured environment.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You've only got to take something like an interview, and if anyone has ever interviewed someone before, they're going to know the things that you've got to look at that are beyond those nerves, that are beyond the pressure of that situation. That first impression is very different in that scenario. But look, I think you've really hit upon something, Dan, here, that anybody who has a business, a franchise business, any business, in fact, that operates from an office environment, okay, that making people feel welcome in that environment is really key. I've heard that a lot, not just in care, but in all sorts of businesses, because it can be a very cliquey environment, and it can really affect your retention. It can really affect the happiness of your staff. So I think you've hit upon something really important.
As an extension of that, Harvey, it's an interesting point. But if you think of a home care workers don't have a place of work, right? So they typically go from their own house where they're sleeping and eating and all the rest of it to a client's home, to another client's home, to another client's home, to another client's home, maybe 15, 20 times a day, and then they go back home again. Now, if that is the case, then they're not having a water cooler moment with the team in the office that they spend time with on a regular basis, right? So we go out of our way to create some of those interactions to be able to help a caregiver to feel like they belong to the organization. It's a really silly thing that we do. When a caregiver's been with us for 6 months, we pay a guy to wash their car. So we have a little auto valet guy that comes to the office. He sits in the car park, and the caregivers come up. They're here for about half an hour. They come into the office for a coffee and a chat, and while they're there, somebody cleans their car for them. And it's a trumped up excuse to bring a caregiver into the office for something that's a positive interaction, just so they're not constantly only being brought in when there's a difficult conversation to have, to try and create that sense of belonging to the organization. Again, I'm a massive advocate for classroom-based training. I know there are some very good software providers out there. I know that training down Teams connections is something that's far more common now than it was pre-pandemic. I get all of that, but the reality is that we see training as an opportunity to bring a caregiver into the office and therefore build relationship with that caregiver. And if we're trying to do that down a Teams connection, we're not getting that ancillary benefit of relationship build. And so therefore the caregiver doesn't feel quite like they belong to the organization in the same way,
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That sense of belonging as well, especially when you get lots of people that do work in an office and then people that don't, and trying to bring them together. It might feel awkward for someone who's not normally in the office to sort of walk into that crowd of people that are always there. So I think, again, you've hit on some really important parts that I think are not looked at enough when we're looking at retention in any of our teams, in any industry. So I think it's really important. Let's have a look. We've got some great comments. I want to make sure we get to all of these. Danny's come back with, it's cliche, but second chance. First impression is supported by science too. He's also come back here with, people are always very judging. I usually notice this right away. Yeah, sometimes that can be positive, sometimes that can be negative, but yeah, people, we're constantly as people looking at other people and summarizing and trying to work out whether they're going to be friendly towards us, whether they're not, whether we fit in, all of these things. And it's complicated, and it needs us as businesses to look at it and to care about it. And if we get it right, or if we strive to get it right, then we're creating some happier places. Let's have a look. Let's go
psychologically as well, Harvey. I mean, that's a very deep-seated reason why, right? Those emotional responses come from the amygdala, which is a part of the brain that deals with your fight or flight.
Yeah.
Decisions.
Yeah. Yes.
And the reason we're making snap decisions like that is because we've got to decide whether the thing in front of us is going to kill us or not, right? Historically, that's where we were, right? So all we're talking about when we judge people quickly is exactly that. You know, we're conditioned by nature to make that decision very, very quickly because our self-preservation might depend on it.
Yeah, exactly. I think sometimes we can't help it. You're right. I think it is a nature thing. You're right. Let's have a look. We've got comment coming up here. Let's have a look from Kelly. Kelly's put one overlooked retention metrics is silence. Disengagement is rarely random and is often the earliest indicator of a relationship is weakening. This is a really good one. I think this is a good one for both of you guys here, right? Because I can relate. I've always been a relatively, you may not believe this, but a relatively shy person. And I would always be the one that's relatively quiet in a meeting. You know, I'd be listening, trying to take things in. I was definitely like that at school. And this to me is a really interesting one. How do you kind of deal with the people who don't speak up? They don't fill in the, you know, the information gathering platform. I've tried not to say survey, Neil. But what do you think about this one, Dan? How do you deal with those quiet people? How do you work them out, make sure they're happy?
I'm reading Kelly's question as slightly different, actually. I'm reading it as what they call quiet quitting, basically, where in essence people disengage, but disengage by not contributing in a way they might have done previously. And I think it's really important that you recognize that whichever communication channel you're using, it's an imperfect science, right? One of the advantages of being able to get people in a room is it's easier to notice when something like that might be going on, right? It's harder when you know, on a telephone call or you're on a messaging service to actually understand how engaged with the question at hand somebody is.
Yeah, you're right. You miss out some of those key body language things, and they're you know, you can see them. You know, when we do things like this, we can all see each other, which helps a lot compared with if this was audio only. But if we were all in the same room, if all of us, are in the same room, then it would, you know, there's even more that's given away. So I think, really important.
Can I just say, even with a gathering platform, I completely agree with what Dan was saying. And that's why I say it's never to replace, it's just an addition. For those that aren't happy about speaking up. So, but I agree, have everybody in a room and you can actually look at body language and you can see people who aren't engaged then much easier.
I think what I would say as well, Harvey, is, I mean, there's that thing about reading body language and whether somebody's body language is open or closed. I also think there's the thing about baselining somebody's normal, right? You talk about being a quiet individual. If you're typically a quiet individual and you're quiet, then that's no different from normal, right? If you're a bit more chatty and then one day you're quiet, that's a baseline difference, right? So we've got to then be thinking about what might be causing that. Now, one of the consequences of us looking after our care teams in the way that we do is we tend to send the same caregiver to the same client week in, week out, which means the caregiver gets to recognize what that client's normal looks like. And they're then in a better position to be able to recognize when something's not normal. Right, and that's a really important part of this, I think.
Yeah, you're right. That baseline for someone's normal is really important. Good to have Rachel with us. She's put exactly, I like that. I can just bring that up whenever I want Rachel to agree with something. It's great to have you here, and she's clearly resonating with the conversation today, so I love that. Let's have a look. What we've got a couple of minutes before we're going into the last part of today's show. Let's have a look at Johnny here. He's put, there's definitely a choice on how one approaches an inherently unpleasant situation. In all the years I've never been greeted with balloons, streamers and cupcakes, but I treat the adversary as a client and try to assuage he's just using words I can't pronounce here, their fears in that first interaction. Yeah, absolutely. I think whenever somebody's worried about a situation, you've just got to make them feel at ease, and you know, that's sometimes something, you know, people can do naturally. Sometimes you've got to learn that. What do you think about this one, Dan?
Well, I would quote a gentleman that knows more about this than I do, and if anybody wants again some more background reading, there's a chap called Bill Benjamin, and Bill Benjamin talks about last 8% conversations, and last 8% conversations are conversations which are inherently difficult conversations. They're called last 8% conversations because the majority of people stop short of having that bit of the conversation because it is so difficult. And the problem in that situation is that it's stressful for you. So you're giving that stress to somebody else. It's stressful for them, so they're feeling that stress from you. And sometimes you reverse away from that thing, not actually having said the thing you need to say. You think you said it, you haven't said it. They've not heard it, but they're frustrated and upset by the whole process. And so you've got to be really cognizant of the fact that sometimes in franchising, franchisors have to have more last 8% conversations than the teams that are within the businesses that the franchisees are running, right? Our role in this sometimes is to help a franchisee by pointing out something difficult and challenging when it needs to be pointed out. And you're not going to do that if you're coming into it not being ready for it being challenging. You can't walk away from a challenging conversation in that situation.
Definitely not. We've got time for one more. I think we've got time for one more. Let's have a look at what Simon has said here. How does that translate into business performance and profit margins? I think this is an interesting one. This came up a while ago, so it's probably in relation to something else we've been talking about. But what I want to talk about here is how does looking after your people, how does, all of these things that we've said today, how does people business interact with profitability business? I can say that one.
I mean, I would summarize that by saying happy staff, happy customers.
Yeah. And those two things then equate to a good P&L, I guess. What do you
look
think?
After one and look after the but I mean, I don't need to say it in front of Dan, but Dan knows exactly that's the situation.
I would say we invest a lot of money in retention strategy, which means that we save money on recruitment, and it probably ends up being as close to cost neutral as we can make it.
Absolutely.
Well,
people very often say to me, like, how is it possible for you to pay what you pay your people, Dan? I said, well, we charge more for our service, but we're providing a better service in that situation, which means that people are happy to pay more because they get a better service because of that. But if you look at the typical cost of onboarding an individual, if you're a 100 employee care business with 70% staff turnover, the reality of that means you're losing 5 or 6 people every single month, which means you've got a cost of recruitment and replacement every single month. The recruitment cost alone might be £1,000 in terms of what you might spend on Indeed and then screening people out, and then you've got onboarding and you've got training, and there's a cumulative cost associated with that. So we look at it slightly differently. I'd love it to be a saving that we then use, but it's not quite that. It's an investment that we make, which results in some element of cost neutrality, basically.
Absolutely. Well, finish with a couple of ones. We've got Danny coming back with happy bees make tasty honey. That's his
phrase. Danny, I like that a lot.
I love that as well. We'll come back with Joe, who's put, I'm terribly shy, quiet and introverted, but rest assured I'm endeavouring to rise above this to be half as brilliant as Harvey. Very good. Yes. Well, Joe is an absolute legend, and I always learn from Joe. Danny's come back with only 18% of employees are engaged in our work. If we had a machine running at 18% effectiveness, we down tools, investigate and invest in that machine. Absolutely.
Really good point. I very often say to our people that our caregivers are our product. If you don't invest in your product, you end up with a bad product, right?
Definitely. Well, we have come to the end of the first part of today's show. It's been an absolute joy to talk about people business with everybody today. Really enjoyed talking with our fantastic community, our incredible guests, Neil and Dan. But we're now going to get to the last part of the show, which is the part of the show where I try and turn off my camera, but sometimes it comes back on and you do see the top of my head. But today I have managed to turn it off. Now, it would have helped if I'd actually got the other hat ready, but I didn't, so I'll just get that. But this is part of the show that's sponsored by my lovely friend Paul Murphy from PJ Murphy and Sons, Bespoke British Hatters. So if you'd like a hat like this one, please talk to Paul. Now, this is also the part of the show where we have a bit of fun and we stop talking about franchising for a little bit and we find out something about our lovely guest. Now, Neil has been subject to this before.
I have.
So it's Dan's go this time. You can choose amongst these. But have you ever met anyone famous? Have you got a claim to fame, or have you got some sort of crazy, unusual hobby? Any of those?
I have met some famous people. Yes, through the course of work, I've done that. Would you like to know who?
Yes, go on. Fun,
Okay,
a good story. Yeah.
I met Charlie State, the Housewife's favourite, and
Okay.
obviously one of the hosts of BBC Breakfast twice, because I've twice been on the red sofa with the business.
Amazing.
I've met Naga Munchetti and also Nina Warhurst through that. I went to Abbey Road Studios in November last year to record a version of Angels by Robbie Williams, which we released as a charity Christmas single.
Wow, where can we hear this?
Not a person, but I actually met and played John Lennon's piano. It has a cigarette burn on the F key, and I hit it. I can't play the piano. I was just like, John Lennon's touched these keys. I'm touching these keys. So I've met, who else have I met? I've met Ron from Republica, because she was a judge on last year's Home Care's Got Talent.
Oh, amazing.
I've met Jay Aston from Bucks Fizz, because they performed at Carefest last year. I met Sonia, also of Eurovision fame, because she performed at Carefest the year before last. So yeah, I've met a few people.
Amazing. Love that story. And I'm gonna try and find your version of Angels now. Let's get that on. Maybe I can.
It's on Deezer. It's on all good music platforms. It's Angels by the Home Care's Got Talent Choir.
Right. Well, I'm gonna check that out, as I encourage you all to check that out. Finally, actually, and I did say this at the beginning, but you've answered these questions beautifully today. So you now get your chance to get me your own back on me and ask me any question you like. And I don't know what it's going to be, so I just like to sort of react to this of the moment. So now is the time.
I'm going to ask you a sport-related question, Harvey. What is your sport of choice?
Golf. But I've been playing golf for years, and my friends will agree with this, but I'm still absolutely terrible at it. But I love getting out and spoiling a good walk with a game of golf. So yeah, I think I'd say golf on that one.
Good. I think it's one of those sports, the harder you try, the worse you get, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I can agree with that one. Well, there we go. We have now finished for today. So first of all, I would like to thank everybody for getting involved in our conversations. This really is what makes this special. It's a conversation with our community. And I really thank you for taking your time today and getting involved in our conversations. And I'd also like to thank our guests, Neil Newman from Gather and Dan Archer from Visiting Angels. It's been a pleasure to have you both on. Next week on the franchise show, that will be the 28th of July. We are going to be talking with the lovely people from Businesses for Sale. It's going to be a fantastic conversation. So please join us for another fantastic franchise conversation next Tuesday, 5:15 GMT, 12:15 EST. And until next time, my lovely friends, take very good care.